All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Mr. Randy Hutchings tonight. He is a field investigator based out of Tennessee. And how's it going today, Randy?
It's going good. How are you today?
Doing good up here in central Iowa. It's starting to get cold up here, though. We're getting down to the 30s and the 20s. Fingers crossed that it doesn't get too cold this winter, but we're still having a good time. How about you guys down there?
It's getting really chilly this weekend, actually.
Does it get really cold down in Tennessee?
It depends because you've got the foothills to the Appalachians, and then you've got the actual Appalachians. So, like parts of them, it gets as cold as parts of Michigan do. But down in some of the hollows, some of the basin, like around Nashville, not so bad, really. It's very mild by comparison.
Okay. Randy, you're a field investigator that a lot of people may not have heard of you before, because as we had talked before the interview, you stay off to the side a little bit. You're not really on the internet a lot. You're not out in the spotlight. Yeah. But I was looking into the Wild Man conference, and I noticed your name, and I was like, man, that's a name I haven't heard before. And I think actually you had contacted me as well on Facebook Messenger. I was like, this is really interesting. I had to talk to this guy. And we had a little bit of a back and forth. Some things happened, but we finally got on. And how did the Wild Man conference go, Randy?
It went really well. For our first year, it went smooth. The presenters and the guests seemed to have had a really good time. All the attendants that we got to talk to said they had a really good time. They really loved the lineup that we had. We had a very eclectic lineup from one end of the Bigfoot spectrum to the other, giving a very, very broad overview on the subject. But it went really awesome.
Well. I heard great things about it. I talked to a few people that actually went, and they said it was a great time. And of course, you had all the great guys and gals from down there. You had, I know, Hellbent Holler guys and Joe and Jesse, and I think Martin Groves was there, and I think Barton was there, all those guys, and I don't want to leave anyone out, but it looks like they always have a good time. And you had some solid lineup, so I hope, is that a thing that's going to happen again, you think, Randy?
We're actually planning the second one right now as we speak.
Awesome. So. Oh, man, that is great. It happened in a interesting area that we'll get into later in the show, Montgomery Bell State Park, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We'll chat about that a little bit later. But I would love to start out by, how is it that you got into all this Bigfoot action to begin with, Randy?
Back, that had been like May 23rd of 1997. My cousin and myself were trekking up to an old abandoned rock quarry that's about 3 or 4 miles outside of the town I live in. And it's about an hour's trek from where you park to actually get up to where this old abandoned rock quarry is. And there's a box canyon there with a big lake. And we got up there to this box canyon and had stuck our feet in the water, just decided we're just going to chill out for a couple hours here on this lake, soak up the sun. It's late May, late spring. We weren't there more than 5, maybe 10 minutes the most. And something atop one of the bluffs off to our right starts vocalizing at us. And the only way I can describe the vocalization that was coming off this thing was as if you would put a howler monkey and combined it with a raging bull and a moo kind of sound. And so we both, my cousin and I both look at one another, and honestly, thinking someone's up there just messing with us, we start making the sounds back and thinking that maybe a hunter's coming off the ridge there. He's trying to have a go at us for whatever reason. And it goes quiet. It goes quiet for about a minute. We figure whoever it was, they had their fun. And right about the time that we're about to discount all this, a boulder about as big around as my torso, 300 pounds at least, comes flying off of that cliffside. And when I say flying, I don't mean as if like I've had people tell me, oh, you sure didn't roll off the cliff. And it had momentum. It went flying, zooming off this cliff a good 20, 25 feet. splashing down in the water right in front of us, which got our attention. And the first thing my cousin says to me is, he looks over at me and his eyes are just huge. And he's like, you'd have to have thumbs to do that. And I'm like, yeah, I think you would. And we're sitting there perplexed as to what just occurred. Maybe a minute, 2 minutes goes by, and the vocalization starts back up again. It's moo, moo. And I have no idea what that means, what those vocalizations really mean. But the message that it felt like was, you need to leave. You're not welcome here. So that's what we did. We ended up leaving. Like, even though we trekked over an hour to get up there, we left. And having grown up here in Tennessee in the sticks, I've been around wildlife my whole life. I've heard everything in the woods. I know what animals sound like out in the woods. I've never heard this sound before. A lot of my relatives are hunters. So me and my cousin went to them initially, and we're just like, what in the world could this be? And most of them were discounting it. One of them said, oh, it's probably a cow that got loose. How did it throw a boulder? And he's like, oh, I don't know how he did that. But so giving us all these discounted BS explanations. And finally, I went online and found a vocalization on the BFRO website. And I don't remember which vocalization it was, but it sounded similar to what we heard. And so I contacted the BFRO, and they got a researcher to get in touch with me. And I told them everything that happened. They explained that, yeah, that's classical rock throwing behavior when they want you to leave an area. And it was through that I got initially invited to be a BFRO investigator for a little while. But it was while I was doing the thing for the BFRO for about 4 months, I met the Tennessee Bigfoot lady, Mary Green. Have you ever heard of her? And
yeah,
Mary Green was working at the time for the GCBRO, which is the Gulf Coast Bigfoot Research Organization. And it turned out that she only lived about 45 minutes up the road from me. So she invited me to come up there and visit her, went up there and visit her. And she basically was what got me into the Bigfoot thing, really. Is she was like, we need more people out there doing this that know about these things, that are willing to go out there and be where they know they are. And yeah, she got me into the GCBRO back in 1997, fall of 1997. And I've been doing it. I did it for them for years. I've done it on the side for groups like the Blue and Gray. I was part of the founding member of the Sasquatch Research Initiative back in the day. So I've done research, like field investigations, for several groups here and there, along with just a whole bunch just for myself, especially just in my
initial encounter happened, Randy.
23.
Wow, that's awesome. When you went up to chat with Mary Green, any interesting things happen when you're up there?
Just the stories that she had. She'd been there, done that. By the time I even came along, she'd been there, done that. So hearing all that kind of, and it was interesting. There was a lot of political stuff between all these groups, especially back in those days. And so the BFRO didn't like anybody talking to her, and she didn't like it if you were a member of the BFRO. And so it was just a whole bunch of hullabaloo.
Yep.
Something I've always tried to stay out of is all the drama. But she knew her stuff. And she told me, she's like, go out in these areas, look for this, look for that. And she's like, if you find this and that, stay in those areas and then start looking for this and looking for that. And just like she said, we started going out into areas. One thing we started looking for was seep springs. She told us to look for seep springs. Seep springs are like where there's springs. It's just the water seeping up out of the ground.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And she said those things are crucial. And the reason being, they're there almost year round. Seep springs are. So even during the worst parts of the year, animals know that stuff's there. They'll come and they'll get water from it. They're going to be watching for the animals that are coming there to get water from it. We use that mentality that she actually told us and found 2 of our active areas that we still have to this day.
Wow. So seep spring is one of the big things that you look for. Are there any other big things that you're looking for when you're trying to narrow down maybe a new area? Or
if we're trying to narrow down a new area, it's trying to find if there's been any generational activity attributed to the area. Has people for years, has it been going back years? Has people been seeing things? Have people been hearing things? One thing we, especially down here in the South, is look for haunted forests, like places where people say that the woods there are haunted. Why are they haunted? And when you actually start talking to these people as to why they're haunted, you'll hear these dead women screaming in the woods, the ghosts of these women screaming. And it's, oh, okay. Yeah, that's what you're hearing, is it? So
That is brilliant. So then after that, then you got into the Bigfoot game. Pretty wild is what it sounds like. You were into all sorts of groups. You're helping out, you're investigating. Were there any other interesting things that you remember over the years? Maybe did you ever get any closer to any of the creatures, or?
I've had personal sightings. My first sighting, I've had 4 sightings thus far. All, surprisingly, all of them within about 150 acres of each other.
Wow.
I don't know how to explain that. I have theories, and I've had people tell me theories that, and a lot of it being that the family in that area are relaxed with me and things like that as to why they all happen in the same little area there. But my first sighting happened on August 12th of 2011. And throughout the 2000s, I had a live event venue business that I ran using state parks, specifically group campsites in state parks that you can rent. And what we would do is we would basically, if you've ever been to a Renaissance festival or a Ren Fair, we basically did that on a smaller scale using group campsites. So we would have like vendors come in from out of state, and they would all set up as merchants in these cabins. And we would have people that would come from all over the place, and they would dress up the parts of nobles and knights and elves and all this crazy stuff, and spend the weekend basically just socializing and buying medieval kind of attire and stuff like that. And we would have jousting events, stuff like that. Like I said, like a miniature Renaissance festival. But through the 2000s, I rented a lot of these state parks for these events that we were having. And it was during one of these events that I had my first sighting, and my mind was the furthest away from Bigfoot at the time. I was in the middle of running this event, and it was about 1:00 in the morning, and we had a 3-hour field battle where people basically use these latex weapons and just wallop on each other, just go Braveheart on one another. And done this for 3 hours, and everyone's going their own little ways now. And one of my staff members is, I'm going to run down here to the river. There's a river about a 1/4 mile off site, down a path, and have some smoke, and I'm going to go to bed. And we got to get up and do this all day again tomorrow. This is a 2-week long event we're running. This is on day 5 of this event. And so I'm like, I'll walk down there with you. So we start to walk down there, and as we're passing the last cabin in what's called C section of this site, we hear this snap crack off to the right hand side of us. And I think it's one of our staff members coming to join us, and turn around, and there is what I can only describe, man, as a 7-foot hairy thing that is in the process of walking parallel to us. We both stop, and the guy I'm with, he's 6'5". He's a big dude. I'm 6'4". I'm a big guy. We turn to look at this thing, and it takes a couple of steps into this high grass on the side of the woods, stops, turns the whole top half of itself to look at us, and just stares at us. And I don't know how to explain this other than, if you've been a big guy all your life, there's this level of, I don't know, intimidation that you have around other people, right? Smaller people. And that was what this thing was projecting towards us. There was absolutely no fear from this thing's body language. The confidence, it was insane. It was just like, we're not even threats. And it turned its half and just walked right into the woods. And it had ruddy red hair, like you would see on a buck in heat. but ruddy red hair, but you could see the musculature under its hair. It was hair, it wasn't fur. You could make out muscle definition. Even though it was 1 o'clock at night, we were about 30 yards from it. There was enough light coming from the moon that you could still make out muscle definition under this thing. Yeah, it turned, walked into the woods, and we both started screaming, like just instinctually screaming like girls. And I don't know how to explain it other than just fear. Just straight up, our brains were scrambled. But we started screaming and running. We started running back towards the tavern area, and a bunch of people come running over to us because they heard us screaming and were asking us what was going on. And we're like, we're not exactly sure. We didn't want to start throwing that on them. But yeah, that was the first time that we had a sighting, or I had a sighting.
Do you mind if I ask a few questions? So
Sure.
That is an amazing encounter. The best thing I love about it is that you weren't out looking for Bigfoot.
No.
It sounds like you're doing some sort of like Renaissance LARPing event. Is that
Yes,
right? Where
that's exactly what we were doing.
LARPing?
Exactly. Yes.
No way. So
yes.
You saw Bigfoot during like a 2-week LARPing event?
Yes, sir, I did.
Was it themed a certain way?
Just high fantasy.
That's amazing. So it's high fantasy LARPing, and then like Bigfoot is like, what is going on with all these people in the woods with these amazing weapons? And he's probably freaking out. This is awesome. Oh man.
That's honestly one of the things I think that I've actually come to think is that may be why they were in the area, is because we were entertainment.
Oh, absolutely. Did you get a look at the Bigfoot's face at all during?
I did not get a good look at the face. I don't know why. I'm not, because I like I said, you could make out musculature underneath the hair in the moonlight, but I don't know if it was the distance or just the darkness of the face or what it was. But when it turned to look, like you could feel the heaviness of that thing's looking at us. It was a feeling I haven't had before.
Would you say it was a male individual?
It struck me as that, yes. And one thing about it too was it was very. I've told people it reminded me more. It had a lot of muscle on it, but it reminded me as if you'd take an NBA player and then you wrapped that muscle on top of an NBA player. Like it was more lean than it was just brick house.
Yeah. So lean, but very muscular as like a got it. Okay. Wow, that's really interesting. Remind me, so how far away again from, you guys were off a little bit away from like the tavern and things like that?
Yeah. We were at the very last cabin before you get on the trail to go to that little river area.
Okay. Wow. Oh, that's awesome.
And from where it was walking too, like I've thought about this a lot because I've had my kids like that slept in that cabin, the last cabin on the other side, and from the direction he was walking, I am convinced he was walking from behind that cabin, where he was peeking in that cabin. The thing I don't get to this day is that he doesn't. He could have easily just turned, taken a step into the woods because that cabin is so close to the wood line, and yet he decided to walk parallel and let us hear him. I don't understand that at all.
The next day, were you able to go and double check for tracks or any evidence? Okay.
We did. Some of my staff members, we had a staff meeting and we talked about what had happened. We're like, look, you don't have to believe us, but it was me and here's my staff member that was with us. Clendo's his name. And basically, because Clendo actually teared up when he was talking about it, one of the guys was a big skeptic, was like, I believe you guys saw something, because he's like, I've never seen that big man cry before. But the next morning, some of the staff members ran out there to where we saw it. We told them where we saw it, and we walked out there. And as we were walking out there, one of them was white as a ghost because there was a big, like 17.5-inch print, just perfect in the grass, and he was just like, and you're sure you guys didn't put this out here? We're like, no, man, we didn't.
Wow. And so you're trying to run a LARPing event and you've got all this evidence going on. So you're like, I can't really like probably just stop everything and start casting this track
Exactly.
because I've got to keep
Yeah.
stuff going on.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Like this was even though I was in field investigating since the 90s, this was the last thing on my mind. I was there to do a job and to direct this event, make sure everything went off without a hitch.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. Did you run through the thinking of maybe it's one of the people here for the LARPing event that had some kind of like costume or something? Did that come through your mind for a few seconds or?
I've had people ask me that. They're like, are you sure it wasn't somebody in a costume? But like, it was, you could see it. You could just see it was a real thing.
Gotcha. Man, that's wild. Oh man. And that happened in Tennessee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Van Buren County, Tennessee.
Okay. Gotcha. Man, that's wild. Did you do research to see if any other sightings have also happened in that area beforehand, etc.?
We had spoke to the game warden guy, the wildlife management officer that's over the place, and he was actually he had actually shared like, oh yeah, we've had a couple of people come in over the years and tell us this Bigfoot story or that Bigfoot story, and they're like whether or not it's real or not. But we started sharing stuff with them. That when that happened, we shared that with them. When other things happen, because again, like I said, all the other sightings I've had have happened in about 150 acres of that area.
This is, man. So here's the thing. So people are always, I'm going to get flack for this, but I don't care. People are always like Pacific Northwest. But dude, from doing 5 years of interviews, Tennessee, the crazy stuff I've ever heard is coming out of Tennessee, dude, in Kentucky. Like it is wild, especially Tennessee, East Tennessee. Oh my goodness. You're in for a good time. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of these woods up here are virgin timber. They've never been logged. There may have been some people that come through them 200 years ago when the pioneers were coming through here, but nobody goes through them nowadays. A lot of the hunters don't even go through these areas anymore.
So that was okay. So did anything else happen during that 2-week span, or everyone's just we got a Bigfoot?
We found out actually, but we found out years later that because again that was in 2011. We found out years later after people started finding out about what had happened at the event. There was people that were like, well, "Let me tell you what happened when I did this."
Oh no!
And there was an instance where there was a married couple, that came out of their cabin. One of them was walking to the bathroom, one of the bathhouses, and said that a tree, this is what she put it, this tree starts dancing just like this, starts shaking like this. And I'm like, so what did you do? And she goes, I turned around and walked right back into my cabin. And I'm like, why didn't you say something to somebody? She's like, what am I supposed to say to somebody? That I'm going to the bathroom and a tree starts dancing? She's like, I didn't see what was making it do that. But another girl got on, I think it was day 11 we were up there. She stopped going to C-section because something growled at her when she went near a bathhouse. Granted, we don't know what it was that growled at her, but something growled at her and it scared her so badly she refused to go back to that section anymore. And then a filmmaking buddy of mine, Josh Manning, he was actually getting up back then and going to the Art Institute of Nashville for his college stuff every morning. And he mentioned that I thought it was maybe you guys signaling that people were awake. But he said, I would get up out of my cabin and as I'm going to the bathroom every morning at about 5:30 in the morning, back behind what's called A section of the campsite, he said you would hear 2 knocks.
Oh.
And he said that, and I thought it was you guys signaling to each other that I'm awake. And I'm like, no, man, we were already in bed. We were asleep by that point. So we had wood knocks. We had stuff being shaken at people, all this stuff that we had no idea all that stuff was going on at the same time.
Oh.
And then we found out later on too from a player that there was a player that said he came out of one of the cabins one time and he said that there was a giant man, the way he put it, was up under the awning of one of the cabins. And he said he could just see him in silhouette. But he said this guy was huge. And he said that I just stood there thinking it was one of us, that we were going to attack him or something. And he said, this thing's just frozen. It doesn't move. And he said, finally, I ended up walking off, and I'm like, okay. And he said it never moved. It just stood there till he was gone. So there's all this potential other stuff that's happened around the same campsite.
This is my new favorite Bigfoot. Like, this is literally my new favorite one, Randy, because it's like you have all these people that are not Bigfoot people, but like experiencing It is so cool, man. Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. Wow. Have you ever gone back and researched that area again?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Heavily. That's actually where our main research area now.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where I've had my other 3 sightings, was in that same area. Not the same to the campsite, but down a trail farther into the woods, but in that area there. Yeah.
Oh, man. So that was 2011. Was it stuff like off the bat, or a few years later that you experienced other things in that area? Or
yeah, so I didn't go looking for anything right off the bat. I told myself that I had rented this place so many times and run so many events out of this place that this had to be like a fluke. This had to be like it just was it was on its way through or something. There's no way it lived here. But after I talked to like I said, I talked to the game warden guy, and he started talking about, oh yeah, they told us about this, and some kids said that Bigfoot destroyed their fort and all this crazy stuff. We actually were going to do an event, and we decided there was this one trail that we'd never used before that's just over the little river area that we were going down to that night. And so we were going to go up this trail, and as I was going down this trail, I just goofily started knocking on trees. And we walk almost a mile down this trail, and I'm knocking on trees like every quarter mile or so. And finally, I knock, and about 40, 50 yards, it seems like, in the wood line, there's a response, and me and the guy I'm with both kind of freeze and go to turn. And as we're turning, on the opposite side of us from where we heard the wood knocks, there was what I can only describe as what sounded like an exasperated sound, like the sound of like that. I have no idea what that sound came out of, but it sounded like a really big guy, just like, and I've wondered ever since if maybe it was, I don't know, it was like, oh God, you gave us away or something like that. I don't know. But so we left. Like, we got spooked by the wood knocks. We left, but we kept coming back, kept wood knocking. They kept wood knocking back at us. I've got a whole bunch of wood knocking videos on my YouTube. But the second sighting I had was on December the 10th of 2015. And me and another guy named Trevor had trekked back, and there was a really large tree that had fallen over. And he's like, hey, do you see that? And this is at a pretty good distance, though, mind you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So he like comes over and literally gets my face, and like right there. And there was something behind this big tree, and you could see what looked like the head and a hump, and its arm was draped over the tree. And we watched as this thing's arm just does this and goes over the tree, and he just disappears. And it was at about probably 50 yards where we saw this. And that was about enough that we wanted that day. So we got out of the woods. The third sighting I had was on June the 8th of 2016. And that's the one that changed everything. That's the one I think we talked about a little bit before when we were back and forth.
Right.
That one I had trekked way back up into this area. I had something approach me earlier that day at a close range and spook me to begin with. And as I'm trekking through some mountain laurel, really thick mountain laurel, I'm having to push it aside, take a step, push it aside, take a step. And as I'm doing that, I push some aside, and about maybe 20 feet from me, there was a big root ball that is at this angle over here. And immediately I see this hole that's in the bottom like quarter of this root ball. And it's June. This is on June the 8th. So June's when coyotes have pups. And so I knew that. And they love to make dens and stuff like that. And I just, because I say it's a hole because you know how like a hole has depth when you look at it, the darkness.
Absolutely.
That's what this thing looks like. And as I'm staring at this hole, like figuring I'm about to get tore up by coyotes, it moves. And it's not a hole at all. And it's like this, when it moves, the only way I can describe the thing that it did was if you've ever had a kid, like put a kid in timeout on a couch, how like a kid will push themselves up against the couch like they don't want to, be there and do this. That's what this thing was doing. And I don't know to this day why I couldn't see it for what it was. I don't know if it was like I've had Ron Moorhead actually told me at the conference just a couple of weeks ago. He's like, maybe you did know what you were looking at and your brain was just like, nuh-uh. I don't know what it was, but I did, when it moved into that position, it gave itself away and I could see what it was. And it was a child. And it was a black-haired, dark-skinned child. It was not an ape. It did not look like a gibbon or a chimpanzee. It looked like a kid. And the fact that it was looking like it was trying to hide and afraid just elicited something in me. I've got 4 kids of my own. And so I tear through this mountain laurel after I realize what I'm looking at, drive all the way home. It's a 40-minute drive to my house from where this area is. I get home. I basically have convinced myself on the drive home that I'm not going to tell anybody that I even had this sighting because who's going to believe I saw a little feral kid? And as soon as I walk in the door, my wife is like, honey, what's wrong? And I'm like, what do you mean, what's wrong? And she's like, I can tell something's wrong. You look tense. She could just tell automatically. And so I took her into the side room and we sat down and I started telling her and I just broke down and started crying. And I don't know, I'm not a crime type, but that's changed me. My wife like literally said to me, she said, honey, what did you think was going to happen if you kept doing this? And I'm like, I thought that I might see something peek out from behind a tree at me, something like that. I didn't think I was going to see what's tantamount to a scared kid, but that's what I saw. So after that, I didn't go up there for about 8 days after that because it spooked me so badly. And it messed with me too, man. Like there was a part of me that was literally like, I need to call someone. Like I need to someone needs to know that there's a hairy kid out in the wood. That sounds crazy, but that's how much it affected me. Like I lost sleep over this. So when I finally ended up going back up there, it changed my entire approach. Like I was going up there with this kind of, I'm looking for a big bipedal ape, and I'm not sure what it is that we're looking for now, to be honest.
And still to this day, still trying to figure out what you're looking for. It sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine you see something like that and you can easily, you hear these stories about how people have what they think the creature is in their sights and they're like, I couldn't pull the trigger because it was just too real. There was a human-like quality to what I was seeing and I couldn't do it. And after hearing a story like that, I totally get it. That's wild.
Yeah.
And you're saying all this within the same 150
roughly
acre wow
area. Yes.
Whoa.
And why? And I had a researcher friend of mine, really well known one. I'm not going to name drop him, but basically he told me that they know you. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's, you've been running those events there for years. for years. They've seen you there. They see that everyone listens to you because you're the one directing events. They see that you're the one that everyone's coming to. You're the one everyone's talking to at some point at these events. And they know me. And he was alluding that like they were introducing themselves almost, or letting me know. That's really messed with me with the juvenile too, is that like I got approached earlier that day, like by something. They got really close. I've got video of that where you can actually hear it walking through the woods towards me. But I've questioned, like, why did that thing even let me see it? Like that, it could have scurried around the edge of that root ball. I would have never known it was there. And they wanted you to see it. Like they almost like they wanted you to know they had a family up there. And that's the way it's changed. It definitely has changed me in that regard. Like when I go up there, it's now I'm dealing with a family. I respect it like that now. I can't tell you what they are, but I can tell you they're enough like us that it's frankly it's disturbing. But
Man, that just hearing that, yeah, it affects you, Randy. Wow. I can't imagine going through what you went through. Yeah, as you said, you've got kids. I have a kid as well. And I think, yeah, that would really make me approach the whole subject a totally different way. Totally different way.
Yeah.
Oh, man. And are still going to that area even to this day?
oh yeah, we still go up there. We leave them fruit sometimes. We've had what's interesting with the game warden in that area, there's an area where one of the trails near this area they've actually shut down. The park has. They don't even let anybody go down the trail anymore. And I asked them, I'm like, why did you just abandon the trail? And they're like, we just got tired of going out there and having to chainsaw all the logs up from the trees that were falling on the trail. And that trail is one of the trails we use to get back to our area. And they've just given up on it because they said that they'd basically chainsaw the logs up. Very next day, a hiker would be like, yeah, there's more trees down. And they'd go out there and the trees would be 10 foot from where the other trees were.
Wow. They're like, yeah, we don't want any more humans going near our area. So we're just going to put trees all over the place, over the trails.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Whoa. That game warden has seen some, man.
Oh, they know
cool.
more.
He's talking to you. Yeah.
They know more than they let on to, man.
Oh, totally.
So much.
Wow. That is, man, that is wild. Tennessee is just story after story, man, of this stuff going on in that state for sure. It's interesting what your wife said too. And I've heard that come up a few times, which is like, what do you think was gonna? It's though.
I didn't think that's what was going to happen. I didn't.
Yeah.
No, but yeah.
Do you have any? Maybe you can't answer this, but have you considered any type of like long-term field recorder?
You mean putting one out there?
Yeah, to see if you can capture audio over an extended
we've done that before. Oh yeah, we caught audio of something approaching the thing 45 minutes after we stick it out there.
Oh wow, man, that is wild. Thank you for sharing all that, man. That's going to take me a while to process all of that. I also wanted to chat with you a bit about. I was reading through your messages, and you had mentioned Werewolf Springs, and I've heard other people mention this too. And so it's primarily a Bigfoot podcast, but other stuff is starting. I'm starting to branch into other things like some Dogman things and etc. And this is going to be fun because I was looking into Werewolf Springs a little bit, and I was like, Montgomery Bell State Park. Why does that sound familiar? And we finally get to connect two of my favorite things, cryptids and a certain 1980s movie that is near and dear to my heart from my childhood. And maybe you get what I'm talking about, but I'll tell you in a bit. But can you share a little bit about what what's going on with Werewolf Springs. I saw that your conference, you were thinking about maybe taking people out there to check it out, but it sounds like it's got quite the history of some interesting things happening.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah, we were actually going to take some people out, and the park put up a gate. They didn't want a bunch of Bigfoot freakos going out there and messing with the spring. It was pretty hilarious. Hellbent Holler was going to go out there and do a whole thing, and so yeah, we got denied. But the story of Werewolf Spring goes back to the 1860s, and the whole premise of the story is that there's two stories. There's one where it's two brothers. There's another where it's a man and one of his workers for his farm. But either way, they were going. The two brothers, one for instance, they went to the cemetery, what's called Hall Cemetery, and there's a spring about a quarter mile from Hall Cemetery called Hall's Spring. They walked up to Hall Spring to get something to drink before going back to town, which at the time the whole area was called was called Burns Station. It's now just Burns, Tennessee. But they went to go get some water, and as they were getting water, according to the story, one of them noticed basically this large, hairy man monster thing on the other side of the spring staring at them in the woods. And they both went running, and one of the brothers got captured and killed, and the other brother didn't. And in that story, that brother made it back to Burns Station, told the people what had happened, and there was actually documented stuff in a newspaper from back in those days where they took a posse out there to Hall Spring, and they even staked a goat up out there at Hall Spring trying to capture whatever this thing was. And that story has turned into basically that's the seed of the Werewolf of Montgomery Bells and Werewolf Springs. That's how it gets its name. And that whole area up there's got Whitehall is the little town next to Burns, and Whitehall has the Whitehall Screamer, the Whitehall Howler, the Whitehall Whistler. That whole area has like names for a lot of the cryptids in that area.
Oh, wow. So there's a lot going on. Is that the Whitehall stuff? Is that like a Dogman or a Bigfoot type deal, or it could be a mixture? Or?
It could be both, honestly. But most of them, I think the community down there's embraced the Dogman thing the last couple of years. So that's really where, especially with Werewolf Springs, the park is really embracing that. So I think the more and more over the years, as you'll come and see that whole anything in the Whitehall area, Montgomery Bell will be Dogman werewolf related.
Okay, guys. So people can actually they can go to this park and they have like Dogman stuff, or
they have a when we were having the con, they actually put on, and we didn't even know they had it. They on the screens there in the park lobby, they were playing the Legend of Werewolf Springs, and it was a little movie that apparently the park made back like in the 90s.
Oh yeah.
So they were playing it for us, and along with the con there, it was pretty neat.
That's awesome. Okay, so I'll let you know, this is my fun fact about Montgomery Bell. So there's there's a movie that I love from the 1980s called Ernest Goes to Camp.
Yep.
Ernest Goes to Camp was filmed in Montgomery Bell State Park, because I've watched YouTube videos about. So the cabins are all up that are in the movie, and like you can go supposedly to that park and you can see all the cabins that are in the film. Yeah. And I'm an Ernest fan outside of I like Ernest stuff. So eventually, like it was already my bucket list. Like, I'm going to go to the state park and see where Ernest Goes to Camp was filmed. And then I find out like it's a total cryptid hotspot. I'm like, this is amazing. This is the best news I've ever heard.
Yep. I've actually run events out of that campsite.
Really? Is it pretty awesome?
It's a beautiful campsite. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Are they Ernest events?
No, they weren't Ernest events.
Oh, that's too bad. I hear they have an Ernest Day every year.
Oh, do they? I don't know about that.
Yeah, they celebrate Ernest Goes to Camp, and they watch the film and like Ernest Goes to Camp things. And my listenership is slowly being like, and I don't like Ernest Goes to Camp. Guys, I love Ernest Goes to Camp, so you're gonna have to deal with it. But so you're super into Bigfoot, and you're focusing on this one area. Are there other areas of the state that you've also been involved with your research, or you're focusing just mainly on Van Buren County?
Oh, no. Warren County, Van Buren County, White County, Grundy County, Sequatchie County. Most of those counties we run around in. We found 4 other hotspots, active research areas in about a 45-mile kind of area near where the one is with the campsite. And the area of the Cumberland Plateau is really my main area that we research and investigate. There's an area called Highway 8. People might Tennesseans will know it as what is it called? Look at me, I just forgot its name.
Hey, that's all right. Keep it safe.
Man, just completely gone.
That's all right.
But Highway 8 up on the Cumberland Plateau, we've spoken to over a dozen families in about a 6-mile area that have all, we were pretty sure, is sharing the same Bigfoot. And the reason that we think they're sharing the same one is they've described, when they talked about seeing him, they've described the same individual. A couple of there's been 3 houses where he's window peaked. And what's wild is the people have described that he's got the same gray swath of hair on the front of his head. Yeah, and hearing these people talk about this stuff completely, they have no idea about the other people experiencing this stuff. And then one of them's talking about, he had a gentlemanly swath of gray on his forehead. And we're like, what do you mean gentlemanly? And he was like, how you get a swath just right there. It's pretty wild.
Wow, dude, that is wild.
Yeah.
Is there?
They name him Atticus.
I love it, Atticus.
The people in that area.
That's legit, man. I love that.
So,
that's a great name. Have you looked into like how that area is set up? Do you think there's anything about the topography or the climate to the area
I do. Well, a lot of the houses that have actually had Atticus messing with them. If you actually go off if you look at the top of the plateau, it's basically, he's just hugging the very top of the plateau. He's just walking the plateau, and all of these houses where you've got these dips in the plateau and the topography, he's going in and hitting all these houses along just the edges of this plateau. And the way the roads go, cut across the area, there's about 4 or 5 different roads that cut off the main highway of Highway 8. And so what you have is all these kind of like islands of roads where these people on these roads, some of these people on the roads may know that stuff's going on, but they're only talking to their neighbors. And then a road down, they're having the exact same stuff go on, but they don't know because they're not talking to their neighbors either. And it's hilarious.
Oh, that's hilarious, but also freaky, man. If you think about it, like they could be experiencing Bigfoot stuff for years and have no idea their neighbors are being messed with. I guess it just goes to show you know who your neighbors are and maybe talk to them a little bit, man. Oh, dude, that's wild.
We had two girls up there that saw one in broad daylight laying on a boulder. Said that it was looking up at the sun. Sun was down on it, so it looked like a giant orangutan almost. And when we were talking to them, we're like, have you talked to your neighbors? And they're like, oh, no, our neighbors are old. They don't ever go outside. They wouldn't know about any of this stuff happening. And we had already talked to their neighbors, and one of their neighbors knew this stuff was going on. And so it's just, in rural communities, if you're having Bigfoot activity, talk to your neighbor. You may be surprised just how much you guys are sharing.
Absolutely. Have you ever, let's see. And I'm not, being from Iowa, I'm not like the best with Tennessee geography. Sorry about that. But have you ever gone far into the far eastern side of the state and done
I have some, yeah. I have some. Like the Smoky Mountain areas.
Yeah, because like I talked to some people and they're like, it seems like the further east you get in Tennessee, like there's some kind of weird stuff that goes on over there. Do you think there's any truth to that, or is it you're like it's all over the place in Tennessee? There's
an area in East Tennessee that I've been to several times called Delano, and the largest Bigfoot sighting that I've ever had reported in me happened there, right next to a Christmas tree farm. And dude swears up and down that this thing was 12 feet tall. The only reason I granted that he could judge height was because for a living, he was one of those guys that goes out and works out on poles, electric lines and all that. And he actually told me, and I know how much 12 foot is because an electric pole, blah, 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 is 15 feet from the ground to the blah. And I think that I really wonder if they don't get bigger the farther east you go from stories that I've been told. The area that I live in, we have over 15,000 caves in just about a 4-county region. So in a way, I kind of wonder if sometimes when people in this area report them as being leaner, if that's because of like an adaptation actually to the caves that we have.
That seems to be a recurring theme that has been coming up in the last few years, is that maybe there's a correlation between, there's that graphic that keeps going around where it's, I think it's like they overlay Bigfoot sightings over like the cave systems in the US. It's a really interesting thing to think about. I don't know. I could be.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a lot of shelter.
Man, you are a total wealth of information, Randy. Have you ever gone out of state to investigate anywhere, or is it primarily Tennessee?
I've been out of state to Northwest Louisiana a couple times. That's the only place I've actually went out of state to go look for this stuff, though.
Okay. Gotcha. Anything weird happened down in Louisiana?
Oh, I got some good vocalizations.
Gotcha. Man, I got to get down to Tennessee for sure. I just got it. That'd be fun.
You get down here, come to Montgomery Bell, man. I'll meet you down there and we can.
Dude.
I'll show you Werewolf Springs and we can go check out Ernest Goes to Camp.
Ernest Goes to Camp in Werewolf Springs. That's the ultimate combination. Randy, this has been a extremely fun chatting with you. And I'm sure I'm sure there's going to be stuff in the future as well. But I know you're a guy that you keep to you're not really out there a lot, but are there ways? I'm sure there's going to be people that hear this episode, and I just got a feeling they're going to be like, I got to contact this dude. Are there ways that people can contact you if they've been having things happen in the same areas that you were talking about, the same counties, etc.?
Sure. They can get hold of me on Facebook. They can get hold of him. I can share my email. I don't know if I need to spell it out, or Tenasquatch@gmail.com, which is
that's awesome.
TENESQUATCH@gmail.com.
Perfect.
Yeah. We've got a team of 6 individuals in the town that I live in that go out, and if we need to do field investigations and all that area.
Cool.
We're down.
And you have a YouTube channel as well people can follow?
I do, but I don't know. I don't have it offhand.
Okay. I'll put it in the link.
It's 40
in the show notes.
40 in Tennessee.
Gotcha. And you have videos and stuff from different times you've been out researching. So definitely people want to subscribe and follow to that. But Randy, any closing thoughts before we head out for the night?
None I can think of, man. I appreciate you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Lastly, how can people keep up to date with what's going on with the Tennessee Wildman Conference?
Easiest way to do that is just keep track of TennesseeWildman.org. That's our website. We'll be changing it up. We'll have any kind of updates on there.
Awesome. Randy, such a fun chat. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, and we'll definitely be in touch in the future.
All right, man.